Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be continuing the late game build series with the addition of the Crucible Knight build. If you're new to the channel, this is where I make unique, fun, and viable builds that are created and tested in New Game Plus 7 and on. The goal of these videos is to try to expand the available builds for these late playthrough difficulty spikes while also making each build cool and unique and not just specific weapons. The build for today focuses on the Crucible Knight, and I honestly had an amazing time with this build. It makes use of 2 Crucible Knight weapons and almost all of the primordial Crucible incantations. It is a fun build that can hit hard up close and from afar, while also providing good defense and a lot of fun and useful spells to play around with. The first weapon utilized is Ordovis's Greatsword. This is a greatsword with the standard moveset and a physical holy damage split. It has a super flashy unique skill in the form of Ordovis's Vortex. This is a chargeable AoE that can hit many times when fully charged. It is a good, reliable damage with very respectable hyper armor, but the real treat is the absurd stance damage that it gets. Fully charged, this skill does 66 stance damage. That means even on New Game Plus 7, you will still be getting stance breaks despite the very high resistance that all bosses gain. The next weapon used is Siluria's Tree. Similar to the Ordovis's Greatsword, it has a physical holy damage split, but this time it is a Great Spear. Great Spears are a good class by themselves, as doing pierce damage is always a huge plus, and the range they provide is no joke. However, I found myself just using this weapon more as a projectile with its skill, Siluria's Woe. This is a chargeable single-shot projectile that deals 27 stance damage and can blow away smaller enemies. I found this very helpful, as not a single Crucible Knight incantation is a single-shot projectile, and this spear fills and then exceeds that role. You can't help but to feel good when you get off a fully charged skill and see a huge chunk of the health bar go missing. Even besides the broken skill, the weapon is still a solid option, so feel free to switch between the two. I am just more comfortable with using greatswords. Now let's get into the wide range of incantations available to this build. Technically, these are Erdtree incantations, but are a subcategory called Primordial Crucible incantations, and I'm just going to refer to them as Crucible Knight incantations. These spells all have the similarity of transforming a part of the user's body and using it as a weapon. I typically just like to take the best of the incantations with me for a build, as I don't like having a crowded spell bar, but with this build, I felt like I needed almost all of them. Quickly, before I go over them, I also use Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for boosted damage and defense. Alright, to start we have Aspects of the Crucible Horns. This spell transforms your shoulder into a horn, and then the player will charge forward, throwing smaller enemies into the air. The distance traveled, damage dealt, and how much knockback this move has all depend on how long you charge it. I found this move to be a great opener and distance closer in fights, and pairs very well with some of the other spells in this build, as you will notice a lot of these are close range spells, and being able to close distance fast is invaluable to this build. Next up we have Aspects of the Crucible Tail. This is the main close range spell in this build and transforms a tail onto the player. It has a smaller, then a follow-up bigger sweeping attack if inputted. It has great hyper armor, so using it after charging in leads to some big damage without being staggered. Overall, a nice close range option if you fear being interrupted. Aspect of the Crucible Breath is an amazing attack to not only deal with a swarm of enemies, as the fire has good range and area coverage, but can also stagger many bigger enemies, so it still has its uses against single targets. Like mentioned before, it also has good synergy with the Horns incantation. On top of all of that, you can also move while using it, so you can control who to hit with more precision, and the spell allows you to hold it for longer to cast more flames and damage at the cost of a little more FP. Aspect of the Crucible Thorns was a new addition in the DLC. It is a chargeable spell that makes the user bundle up and then spin around, releasing thorns all around them. I found the best use of this spell to be when you're surrounded by enemies, and the closer they are, the more thorns hit them, thus the more damage they take. It can also be used as an area coverage spell, like the Breath incantation, but I found it to be inferior at that job, so I typically just kept it on for this sole purpose. Definitely the most niche of the spells, but still worthy to be equipped in my opinion. There's one last Crucible Knight incantation added in the DLC called Aspects of the Crucible Bloom. This is the one incantation that did not make the final roster for the build for one small reason. It sucks. Long charge time, terrible damage, inconsistent hitboxes, every single other spell listed would do you so much better in my opinion, so it's best just to leave this one alone. Before moving on, I would like to cover one more possible addition to this build, and that is the Ash of War aspects of the Crucible wings. Sadly, this move is stuck as an Ash of War with no spell option. It can be put on most weapons and does a thrust attack after leaping into the air. However, if you equip it to a Twin Blade, you will get a unique flurry attack instead. Alright, that wraps up all of the offensive gear. Now onto the talismans. I am using my standard Dragon Crest Great Shield and Crimson Seed +1 talismans as I find them necessary in any New Game +7 run. Next, I use the Shard of Alexander for increased damage from Ordovis's Vortex and Soluria's Woe. Lastly, Godfrey's Icon is a must as it will not only increase the damage of these skills, but also any spell you charge. For the Wondrous Physic, I recommend the Opaline Hard tier to also help with the damage negation, and then the second slot is more open for customization, but if you want a suggestion, I would go with the Stone Barb Crystal tier to help with your stance breaks. The armor that I'm using with this build is the Crucible Axe set, as it not only looks amazing, but each piece of the set also provides a buff to your Crucible Knight incantations, so that's always helpful. There is another armor set, the Crucible Tree set, that provides the same effect, and it just comes down to which looks cooler for you. Alright, time for the pros and few cons of the build. To start, I love playing through the game with this build. Every weapon and spell looks great with each other and fits the theme so well. From a gameplay perspective, this build is also super solid, covering all of the options. I seem to always have a counter to every enemy, and I really did feel like one of the elite troops that these knights are. I will say though, a downside of the build is it does have some holy damage floating around. While it is not that bad in the DLC, it is still annoying to deal with in the late part of the base game. Definitely not a deal breaker, as only a small fraction of the damage you're dealing is holy, but it's at least worth mentioning. Overall, I will definitely say this is one of the most fun builds that I have played throughout my time with this game, and I cannot recommend it enough. That wraps up the video for today. I hope it inspired a build for you, and I plan on making more videos like this, focusing on builds that can not only hold up, but are also fun in late playthroughs. If you have any ideas you want to see or have any thoughts on the build today, please leave a comment and I'll make sure to read them all. With that, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until next time.